You're tuning in to the deep dive. And, well, you're probably here because you want to get straight to the good stuff, right? Cut through the noise.
Yeah, skip the fluff.
Exactly. We take a bunch of sources, dig deep, and pull out the knowledge you actually need. Efficiently, thoroughly. And hopefully we find some surprising bits along the way.
Think of it as your knowledge shortcut.
Your shortcut to being, genuinely informed.
And today, we're diving into a really fascinating book. Robert Greene and Joost Elfer's The 33 Strategies of War. Might sound intense.
Yeah, sounds like military history class.
Right. But honestly, the lessons in there are incredibly useful for, well, just about anyone trying to navigate life.
Totally. And look, we're not going to be breaking down troop movements or anything. Our mission here is different. We want to pull out those core strategic principles, the stuff about human behavior, motivation, how to actually achieve things.
And see how they apply day to day. Your job, relationships, any project you're working on.
We're hunting for those aha moments, the takeaways you can actually use, no helmet required. Ready to jump in?
Let's do it. So maybe we should start with something pretty fundamental to, well, any group effort. Morale and shared purpose.
Okay, yeah. The book talks about turning things into a crusade. That sounds pretty strong language. What's the idea there?
It's really about galvanizing people. You unite them around a common goal, often by pointing to a shared enemy.
An enemy, like a real person.
Not necessarily. It's often more conceptual. Think of it as a challenge, an obstacle the group needs to overcome together. The trick is making everyone feel like their own survival, their own success, depends on the group winning.
Okay, so it's that feeling of we're all in this together. If the ship goes down, we all go down. That's a powerful motivator.
It really is. It builds that sense of belonging, that shared identity. The book brings in Sun Tzu here.
The Art of War guy?
That's him.
Yeah.
His point was about having the same aim as your leaders, sharing life and death without fear. When people feel that connection, loyalty runs deep.
Makes sense.
But the flip side is also true. The book warns how fast things like fear or discontent can spread like wildfire. Undermines everything.
Right, the bad apple thing. Didn't the book have an example with Julius Caesar? Dealing with mutiny or something?
Yeah, exactly. He heard whispers of trouble in the ranks. So what did he do? He didn't let it fester.
He just ignored it?
No. He went straight to the source, arrested the guys stirring things up. Then he reminded all the soldiers of their shared history, their victories together.
Ah, decisive. Cut it off at the root and reminded them who they were as a group.
Precisely. Refocus them on that collective purpose.
Yeah.
So, okay, if you have this energized group, this shared purpose, how do you use that effectively? That brings us to choosing your battles.
Which the book calls the perfect economy strategy. Sounds very efficient. What's the core idea for, us regular folks?
It's basically recognizing that your resources, time, energy, focus, even political goodwill, they're all limited. They're finite.
Right, you can't do everything.
Exactly. So you have to be really, really selective about where you invest those resources. Think about strategic allocation, not just money, but your valuable time and energy. Pick the fights where the potential win is way bigger than the total cost.
And that includes those hidden costs, right? That's a key point you mentioned.
Absolutely crucial. It's not just the effort you see. It's the time lost, the opportunities missed, maybe relationships you damage along the way.
Yeah, that rings true. Sometimes the book suggests maybe going head-to-head isn't the smartest play. Maybe it's better to find a more indirect way, undermine things subtly.
That's definitely part of it. It's about minimizing how much you spend, resource-wise. It reminds me of a Nietzsche quote the book uses, something about breaking your leg.
Oh, yeah. How does that go?
He said something like, you rarely break your leg climbing up a mountain, but it happens more often when you start taking it easy, choosing the easy pass.
Huh. Interesting. So complacency is dangerous.
That's the strategic warning. Constantly facing smaller challenges keeps you sharp. It stops you from getting caught totally unprepared by a big one later because you got lazy or complacent.
Okay, so constant small tests keep you battle ready, so to speak. And didn't Nietzsche also talk about taste being like self-preservation? The book linked that to defense, right?
Yes, exactly. His idea was that taste is partly an instinct for what to avoid, what's harmful. The book connects this to the idea that constantly being on the defensive, even spending small amounts of energy swatting away minor annoyances, can actually drain you completely over time, impoverish you, strategically speaking.
Like death by 1,000 paper cuts. You waste all your energy on small defensive moves.
Precisely. So it's knowing when to engage, when to ignore, and when to conserve that energy for the things that really matter. Now maybe we can zoom out a bit and look at strategy itself, how the book frames it.
Okay. So the book argues strategy isn't just some dusty old military thing. It actually reflects what's happening in society, right? Like unconventional tactics becoming more common everywhere.
Exactly. It mirrors broader trends. But, and this is key, the strategies that really work, time after time, they tap into something fundamental about human psychology.
So the tools change, the world changes, but basic human nature, that stays pretty constant.
That seems to be the core insight. And the book also really stresses learning from failures, especially military ones, actually,
Why military failure specifically?
because they often starkly reveal where human error messes things up. The limits of just trying to brute force a solution, whether that's in business, politics, or, even personal arguments.
Right, those failures are like case studies in bad decision-making, especially when emotions get involved. And the book holds up this ideal strategist, doesn't it? Someone rational, balanced.
Yeah, rational, emotionally balanced, and always aiming to get the job done with the least possible loss. Minimum cost, maximum effect. Whether that cost is money, time, reputation, relationships.
That sounds like a good goal for anyone, really, striving for that kind of clarity and efficiency.
It really does. And here's a provocative point the book makes. Even if your goal is peace, or something seemingly anti-conflict, you still need a strategy to achieve it.
Wait, so even pacifism needs a strategy. How does that work?
Well, simply wanting peace isn't enough.
Right.
You need a plan. How will you convince others? How will you counter opposition? The moment you start planning how to achieve peace, you're using strategy.
Huh. Okay, that reframes things. It's the how, not just the what's. Then the book kind of tackles this historical angle, how strategy was often kept exclusive. Like only for the generals, the kings, the powerful men.
Yes, it points out how, historically, strategic knowledge was sometimes deliberately kept from common soldiers or from colonized people, a way to maintain control.
Keep people in the dark so they can't challenge the status quo.
Exactly. But the book argues strongly against this. If strategy is just the art of getting things done, of turning ideas into reality, why limit who learns it? It actually benefits everyone if more people think strategically.
Makes sense.
And it pushes back against the idea that it's solely a masculine thing, pointing out powerful female war deities in mythology, like Athena.
Right, Athena, goddess of wisdom and warfare. So the notion that women, or any group kept out historically, are somehow less strategic,
Yeah.
that's just about access and opportunity, not inherent ability.
Precisely. It's about who's been allowed in the room, who's been encouraged to develop those skills. It definitely broadens the idea of who a strategist can be.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's shift to connecting all this knowledge with, well, actual experience.
Right, the link between thinking and doing. The book brings in Dostoevsky here.
It does. His perspective highlights how vital it is to connect ideas with lived experience. The danger, the book warns, is twofold. One, we get buried in information that's irrelevant, that doesn't actually help us act.
Yeah, like endlessly scrolling social media.
Exactly. And two, we go through significant life events but fail to actually learn from them. We don't analyze what happened, what worked, what didn't.
So we need that feedback loop. Theory informs practice. Practice refines theory. It can't just be one or the other.
That's the essence of it, developing practical wisdom, where you test ideas in the real world and then you really dissect your experiences to pull out the lessons. The book even calls life a kind of serious game.
A game?
Yeah, but not frivolous. A game with high stakes that demands your full attention, your best strategic thinking. It's this constant cycle of learning, acting, learning again, adapting. Okay, now for maybe a trickier topic, dealing with enemies.
Ah, yes, the polarity strategy. That word enemy still feels a bit much. Why does the book insist on identifying enemies, even if we use air quotes?
Well, the argument is that conflict, in various forms, is just unavoidable in life. And to handle it well, you need clarity. You need to know who or what stands in your way or what principles you're actually fighting against.
So it's less about hate and more about strategic definition. Like this is the obstacle, this is the opposing force.
Exactly. It could be a business competitor, sure. But it could also be a systemic problem, a bad habit you have, anything that represents what you oppose. Defining the enemy gives you focus and direction. It clarifies what you're actually striving for.
Okay, defining yourself by what you're not or what you're against. And the book says once you identify them, you should have this sort of internal declaration of war. Sharpen your focus.
Kind of, yeah. Think of a magnet. The opposing poles create the force field. Your defined enemies, strategically speaking, provide that opposing force. They give you energy, clarity, they help solidify what you stand for.
But the book is also realistic.
How so?
It acknowledges that sometimes, with certain opponents or problems, compromise just isn't on the table. You can't always meet in the middle.
That's a tough pill to swallow, but probably true sometimes. But isn't there a danger here? A reversal, the book calls it, like getting too focused on enemies. Absolutely vital counterpoint, yes. Identifying opposition is one thing. Becoming obsessed, seeing enemies under every rock, descending into paranoia, that's incredibly destructive. That warps your whole view of reality.
Right, you lose perspective.
Totally. The advice is, keep suspicions private unless you have proof. And be careful not to push people into corners unnecessarily. Don't polarize situations to the point where there's no way back. It mentions Margaret Thatcher being aware of that specific danger.
Interesting. So it's a tool, but one to be handled with extreme care. Strategic awareness, not paranoia. Okay, let's pivot to adapting, changing things up.
Yes, this is huge. Tailoring your strategy to the specific situation, the specific opponent. The book uses that amazing example of Miyamoto Musashi, the swordsman.
Oh yeah, the undefeated guy. What was his secret again?
He never fought the same way twice. He'd analyze his opponent and adapt. Arrive super early to mess with their head, use two swords against a crowd, play psychological games. Total flexibility.
Wow, so he embodied that idea.
Perfectly. And it links back to Sun Tzu again. You only win the same way once. Circumstances constantly change. What worked yesterday might be useless today.
And the danger is getting stuck, right? Trying to force old solutions onto new problems. Just because you read a theory doesn't mean it applies right now.
Exactly. Overthinking, getting rigid, not being present to what's actually happening now. Information overload can be as bad as having no information if you can't adapt it.
Which leads to that powerful idea. Erase the memory of the last war, even if you won.
Yeah, that's a striking concept. Clinging to past victories makes you complacent. You just try to repeat the same trick. Dwelling on past defeats, on the other hand, can make you too timid, afraid to take risks.
It's like you're haunted by the past either way. And didn't the book mention that Vietnamese general Vong Ging Griep? He had a really intense practice related to this.
He did. Apparently, even after winning major campaigns, he'd analyze them as if they were failures.
Wow.
To force himself and his commanders to keep learning, keep evolving, never settle, to avoid that very complacency trap, and an incredible level of self-critique.
That really drives home the point. Always approach the new situation fresh.
Okay, what about staying calm under pressure? Presence of mind.
Presence of mind. The book defines it as that inner balance, that ability to stay focused, keep perspective, even when everything's going crazy around you. It's the opposite of letting fear or anger take over.
And the book says our biggest weakness often isn't lack of skill, but just losing our nerve, hesitating.
Exactly. Getting scared, becoming overly cautious, right when decisive action is needed. The argument is, in those crunch moments, you almost need to consciously amp up your confidence, tap into a more aggressive energy to push through the fear.
So preparation is for carefulness, but action requires boldness.
That's a good way to put it. Prepare meticulously, plan B, plan C. But once you engage, commit fully. Act decisively. Mistakes happen, but hesitation can be fatal.
I love that story of the book about the tea master and the samurai. Can you remind me of that? Sure. This samurai is terrified before a duel. The tea master, seeing this, doesn't give him a pep talk. He just calmly guides the samurai through the detailed, precise steps of the traditional tea ceremony.
Ah, so focusing on that simple, concrete task.
Exactly. It grounded the samurai, pulled him out of his fear back into the present moment. It restored his composure just through focused action. A great little technique.
That's really practical. And there's a reversal here too, isn't there, about using those moments when you lose it?
Yes. Well, obviously you don't want to lose your presence of mind. Those moments when you feel overwhelmed or panicked can be incredibly valuable learning experiences.
How so?
By noticing how you react under pressure, what triggers you, what your default fear response is, you can understand your own weaknesses much better. And then you can develop ways to manage them next time. The book even hints that people who've never really lost it might be more vulnerable when they finally face something truly shocking.
Because they haven't built up that resilience, that self-awareness from surviving smaller stumbles. Okay, makes sense. Finally then, let's talk about momentum, getting things moving.
Right, and this connects to that intense Napoleon quote. Death is nothing, but to live defeated is to die every day.
Oof. Powerful. What's the strategic takeaway there?
It's about the vital importance of seizing the initiative, acting decisively, maybe even before you feel totally ready.
Mm.
That whole crossing the Rubicon idea, making a commitment you can't easily back out of.
Taking the leap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That commitment, that pressure, it can actually force you to be more creative, make the most of what you have. The book suggests it develops your ability to think fast, act fast, overcome the inertia of hesitation, and build forward momentum.
Okay, wow. So, wrapping up this deep dive into the 33 strategies of war,
Yep,
we've really covered a lot of ground.
we really have. From morale and
So,
purpose,
to picking battles wisely, managing
the
resources,
nature of strategy itself, adapting to change,
connecting knowledge and action, understanding opponents.
and then presence of mind and decisive momentum. Yeah, quite a journey.
And it's fascinating, isn't it, how these ideas, born from warfare, feel so relevant to just navigating everyday life.
Absolutely. The underlying principles about human nature, about achieving goals against resistance, they translate surprisingly well.
It really makes you pause and think, doesn't it, about the little battles we fight every day at work, in our personal lives, even just trying to stick to a goal. How are these strategies already playing out, maybe without us realizing it?
That's a great question.
And maybe the more provocative thought is, which of these strategies could you consciously choose to use? How could thinking more strategically help you navigate your challenges more effectively? It seems like mastering this stuff isn't really an end point.
No, definitely not.
It's more like a continuous journey, right? Learning, adapting, refining how you think and act.
A journey that can definitely empower you along the way.
Couldn't agree more. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until the next exploration, keep thinking strategically.
Thank you for joining us at Wisdom House, where we bring you timeless insights from the greatest books. If you found this deep dive valuable, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Wisdom House. Stay curious, stay inspired, and we'll see you in the next video.